The air on that pristine Saturday morning was thick with the smell of freshly cut grass and the promise of a sweltering summer day. For most residents of the immaculately manicured Oak Ridge Estates, it was a day for sleeping in or heading to the community pool. For me, it was yard sale day. My garage had been slowly succumbing to an avalanche of things we no longer needed: outgrown kids' bikes, a coffee maker from 2012, boxes of novels I'd sworn I'd read again but never did. It was time for the great purge. I had done my homework. Our homeowners association, a notoriously strict entity that governed everything from mailbox color to the acceptable shade of beige for your window trim, had very specific rules about yard sales. Article XI, Section 3, stated that each household was permitted 2 yard sales per calendar year, to be held only on a Saturday or Sunday between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. Crucially, it also stipulated that all sale items and displays must be confined to the resident's private driveway and/or garage and may not obstruct any public sidewalk or street. I had a printed copy of the bylaws on a clipboard inside, my proverbial ace in the hole for just such an occasion. My setup was a textbook example of compliance. 3 folding tables were neatly arranged on my driveway, showcasing everything from old board games to a set of barely used golf clubs. A clothing rack stood near the garage door, and a few larger items, like a toddler bed and a rocking chair, were placed tidily near the back. Nothing touched the sidewalk. Everything was clean and organized. It was, by all accounts, a model yard sale. But in Oak Ridge Estates, compliance often isn't enough. You also need the tacit approval of Mrs. Davison. Mrs. Davison lived directly across the street in a house that was the architectural equivalent of a disapproving stare. Her lawn was a perfect, unnaturally green carpet. Her windows were so clean they seemed to be invisible portals into her world of silent judgment. She was the unofficial warden of our neighborhood, a woman who seemed to derive her life force from spotting and reporting minor infractions. A garbage can left out an hour too long, a basketball hoop with a slightly frayed net, a flag flown a day after a federal holiday, nothing escaped her eagle eye. From the moment I carried out the first table at 7:30 a.m., I could feel her watching. The blinds on her front window twitched like a nervous tick. When the first customer arrived, an elderly man who bought a fishing rod, Mrs. Davison came out to retrieve her perfectly empty mailbox, casting a withering glare across the street that could have soured milk. By 10 a.m., a gentle but steady stream of people were browse. Neighbors I knew, families from a few streets over, all friendly and polite. The atmosphere was light. I was haggling over the price of a blender when Mrs. Davison made her first move. She marched to the edge of her driveway, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, and yelled across the street, "Alex, your customers are parking in front of my house." I looked. A minivan was parked on the public street, several feet away from her driveway entrance. It was a perfectly legal parking spot. "It's a public street, Mrs. Davison," I called back politely. "They aren't blocking you in." "This is a residential community, not a flea market parking lot," she retorted before spinning on her heel and storming back inside. An hour later, the real drama began. I saw her through her window, phone pressed to her ear, pacing back and forth like a caged tiger. Her free hand chopped the air as she spoke, her face a mask of escalating fury. A cold dread seeped into my stomach. She couldn't be. There was no way she would. The distant wail of a siren cut through the peaceful morning chatter. Heads turned, my customers looked around confused. The siren grew louder, closer, until a police cruiser turned onto our street, its lights flashing, and pulled to a stop right at the curb between my house and hers. My face burned with a mixture of anger and humiliation. Time seemed to slow down. My friendly neighborhood yard sale had just become a scene. 2 officers got out. One was older, with a graying mustache and a weary expression that said he'd seen it all. The other was a younger woman, sharp and alert. As they got out of the car, Mrs. Davison burst from her front door like she was being launched from a catapult. "Thank God you're here, officers," she declared, her voice ringing with manufactured panic. "This situation is completely out of control." She pointed a trembling finger at my driveway. "This man is running an unauthorized commercial enterprise. It's creating a public nuisance, attracting transients, and causing a serious traffic hazard." I feared for my safety. Feared for her safety? From a mother of 3 buying a used tricycle? The absurdity was breathtaking. The older officer, whose name tag read Shti Miller, held up a hand to slow her down. He turned his gaze on me, his eyes scanning my perfectly legal setup, the family's, browse, the general lack of any out-of-control situation. He walked up my driveway, his partner following. "Good morning, sir. I'm Sergeant Miller." We received a 911 call reporting a major disturbance and a threat to public safety at this address. My heart was pounding, but I forced my voice to remain steady. "Good morning, Sergeant. My name is Alex. As you can see, I'm just having a yard sale. There's no disturbance here." "He's lying." "Mrs. Davison shrieked, having followed the officers across the street. "This is against all the rules. He's blocking the sidewalk. His customers are blocking the street. It has to be shut down." I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment I had prepared for. "Actually, that's incorrect," I said, looking directly at Escalate. "Miller, our HOA bylaws allow for 2 yard sales per year. I'm in full compliance, and as you can see, nothing is obstructing the sidewalk." SGT Miller looked at the clear, unobstructed sidewalk, then back at Mrs. Davison. Her face was turning a blotchy red. "The bylaws are irrelevant when public safety is at risk," she insisted. The younger officer spoke up. "Ma'am, a 911 call is for emergencies. Is there a specific immediate threat we need to address?" "The threat is this entire illegal event." "SGT," Miller sighed, the sound of a man whose patience was wearing thin. He turned to me. "Sir, you mentioned the bylaws. Do you have a copy of them?" "Yes, I do," I said, a wave of vindication washing over me. I walked into my garage, grabbed the clipboard, and walked back out. I opened it to the page I had bookmarked, Article 11, Section 3, and handed it to him. SGT. Miller took the clipboard and began to read, his finger tracing the text. "Mrs." Davison peered over his shoulder, her expression a mixture of arrogance and impatience, certain that her interpretation would be validated. After a moment, the sergeant looked up. He fixed his gaze on Mrs. Davison. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat and professional, "according to this document, your own HOA's rules, this gentleman is doing everything by the book. It says 2 sales per year, on a weekend, during these hours, confined to his driveway. He appears to be in 100% compliance." He handed the clipboard back to me. "Furthermore," he continued, his tone hardening slightly, "a 911 call is for life-threatening emergencies, fires, crimes in progress, serious medical issues. A yard sale that you find personally annoying does not qualify. You tied up an emergency line and pulled us away from potential real crises." Mrs. Davison's face crumbled. The arrogant certainty evaporated, replaced by a stunned, slack-jawed disbelief. She looked from the officer, to me, to the clipboard in my hand, as if it were a forged document. But the traffic," she stammered feebly. "There are 2 cars parked legally on a public street," the female officer stated. "That is not a police matter." SGT Miller gave her a final stern look. "Please do not use the 911 system for non-emergencies again. If you have a dispute with your neighbor over HOA rules, you need to take it up with your HOA board. This is not a criminal matter." With that, the officers gave me a polite nod, turned, and walked back to their cruiser. The yard sale customers, who had been watching the drama unfold in hushed silence, began to murmur. A few of them shot me sympathetic smiles. Mrs. Davison stood frozen in my driveway for a long moment, a statue of pure humiliation. The officers got in their car and drove away, the flashing lights now off, the siren remained silent. The emergency was over. She finally seemed to realize where she was, turned without a word, and performed the longest, slowest walk of shame back across the street to the sanctuary of her beige fortress. The moment her door clicked shut, the tension broke. A man who was looking at the golf club started to clap slowly. Another neighbor laughed out loud. "Way to stand up to her, Alex," someone called out. The rest of the day was my most successful yard sale ever. People I didn't even know came by, having heard the story from neighbors. They bought things almost as a show of solidarity. My kids' old bikes, the coffee maker, the rocking chariot, all sold. Mrs. Davison did not emerge from her house again. That afternoon, as I packed up the last of the unsold items, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with the wad of cash in my pocket. I had stood my ground, armed not with anger, but with simple facts. I had faced the ultimate HOA Karen. a woman who weaponized emergency services over personal annoyance, and I had won. The quiet that now emanated from the house across the street was the sweetest sound I had heard all day.